I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat, couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who will listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the light of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe?
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And
TheTaraReade came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US-printed walking papers. And knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character. That his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, "Isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman." Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that TheTaraReade gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bares their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
Of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death. And drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer.
Welcome everyone to the Politics of Survival. I'm your host, TaraReade. Yeah, so every time you look at the news, and as you know, I'm still in Moscow, Russia, but as you look at the Western media, as you look at the international media, of course, all eyes on Gaza and the horrific war crimes that Israel is committing in Gaza against the Palestinian population. And there is no equivocation, there's no other word, they are war crimes. The UN director in New York City, who'd been there for 30 years, gave his letter of resignation and a step down because he said, we're watching a genocide. It is horrific. It makes me very ashamed to be an American, but very relieved that I have political asylum in Moscow, Russia, And I am sorry to see so much suffering 10,000 Palestinians dead, half of them children. And right before we came on air, Israeli government told a population to evacuate a hospital and go south. And as they did, they bombed women and children, and they bombed the ambulances evacuating. It's unconscionable. It's unimaginable. And I know many of us that are in this space that do a lot of information and try to be independent and push back against the war narrative are feeling useless and frustrated as we watch people continue to die in massive amounts of numbers. And I know we all need a relief from that because we were all on the same page. Now, I have gotten some pushback from people, and I want to address it real quick. I have had the same position for years. One of my colleagues was a mentor to Shireen Abu, who was killed 2 years ago by Israeli forces. She was assassinated wearing her press uniform and her helmet. She was sniped in the back of the head. It was finally admitted by Israeli that IDF killed her. I've always sympathized with the Palestinian struggle. So those of you that had followed me, that suddenly unfollowed me because of that, or criticized my position, sorry, but I don't agree with killing women and children and civilians. I don't believe in genocide. I don't believe in ethnic cleansing. It's where I stand. And I will continue to stand there. And as far as that goes, we are going to have a great show. We have someone here who is Russian American, and he will tell you his journey. But before we do, I wanted to lighten up a bit because we have had so much dire news coming at us, and we're entering into a conflict that seems to be going worldwide. I wanted to start in Russia. There's a Russian account that I follow, and I wanted to raise this up. And Reef, if you could raise up the video, but they're very offended by what's happening. Some people are doing in the snow. They're doing sculptures of snow dicks. And so the vice mayor has announced that he is going to ban snow dicks. And I want to know how you feel about that. So make some comments. Make your, if you want to do hashtag save the snow dicks, if you want to do hashtag get the snow dicks, they're using bulldozers to get them down. They must be very strong snow dicks to have to use bulldozers. But I thought it was kind of a funny story. What do you think, Reef?
I mean, yeah, who doesn't love some phallic snow symbols? So
Alex. So anyway, get the tweet, put the tweet up there from that account so you can at least lift the account. Because I thought that was pretty funny. So if you want to follow it, it's on my account.
If I may.
I got you.
Oh, and let me bring in my guest. My guest is, his name Stas. I'm going to call him Stas so that I don't destroy his beautiful Russian last name. And I'm going to let him say it for you. And he is here with us tonight. Hello, Stas.
Good. Good to be here on this thick of a day. Well, on the theme of snow dicks, this mayor, he's got a very incorrect approach to this. I'm in all seriousness. Obviously, this guy doesn't understand tourism, because right now he could have like flocks of Japanese coming and paying to go pray at the snow dicks, because they do pray at phallic symbols. So this is all about marketing. I mean, obviously this is good sculptural work, and you should be sending this around Japan.
Could you bring up the actual tweet that has the name of the city and what was said, like the original tweet? Because I want to. It was somewhere. Tell us where this is, Stas, in Russia. You know how Americans are with maps.
It is the vice mayor of Yekaterinburg, I think is how you pronounce that.
Yekaterinburg. That's in the northern. That's in the central Ural Mountains.
Okay.
Which doesn't say much, because the Ural Mountains are about the size of the Appalachians. So it's still kind of early for that much snow for them. They'll probably melt. They're not serious snow dicks. The snow dicks really come out toward around the end of November.
I mean, you at least need 6 inches of snow for that, right?
Not much snow. Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, it's very bad marketing. He's not looking globally. He should set up a park of a park of male genitalia peni. I guess is it peni when most of penises peni.
Dude, I would
I,
totally take like some of my friends and go there like on a plane now if they would allow those to exist. I mean, what the
yeah,
heck?
they could have a Japanese a Japanese themed holiday there.
Or X.
The
Well,
pilgrimage to the snow dick.
there you have.
Japanese like all that. I'm sure they'll flock.
All right. Well, all right. So we went from like horrific like news that we have spinning around to snow dicks to like that's their focus. That vice mayor is trying to get rid of him, and he had the bulldozers out. Like you saw some of the. If you look and audience, if you go to my or family, we're all family here. If you go to my Twitter account at Reade Alexandra, you'll see, and you can follow that account that posted it. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's a good account. So you know what I wanted, Stas, I wanted to get into you because this is about you actually. And so we're going to move away from that subject
I mean,
matter.
I've been called a dick a few times in my life, maybe more than a few, but
From snow sculptures that are, but I wanted to bring attention to your background and career so you could tell some of our fam here who you are and your professional background and what brought you to Russia, because you're Russian American. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what led you to now be living in Moscow.
well, we'll start off with Russia is my homeland, not just historic homeland, but the actual place I was born. Well, the place I was born is Lugansk, which was artificially attached to Ukraine back in 1921 by Lenin. So it's now back as part of Russia. I always wanted to be back as part of Russia. Those areas were always Russian. They never wanted to be part of Ukraine. But when it was under a communist rule, it really didn't make much of a difference. But things changed in 1991. So my parents immigrated to the U.S. in 1979. I was 8 years old, so went with them. Didn't have much choice one way or the other. So grew up in the U.S., mostly in the South.
What part of the South?
Most of the time, we lived in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, that's beautiful there.
Yeah, it's a good southern city, and then I finished university in Raleigh, North Carolina. 3 times. So same university. I'm pretty sure I bought them at least 1 or 2 classrooms. They keep asking me for more money, but I'm pretty sure they owe me by this point. So then joined when I was a freshman. I joined ROTC and then enlisted in the reserves. As a guard while still in university, and then in '95 got my commission, became an active duty Army officer, and then served out 11 years total. Left 18 July 2004. That was what Russians call Dembi, my last day of service.
And you had to deal with the U.S. adventures in former Yugoslavia. And that's what did it for you. Can you talk a little?
No, that's not what did it for me. That's not what did it for me.
Oh, that's not what did it. Okay.
No. What did it for me was 1999. It did it, but it didn't quite do it all the way, because I still had a contract. Officer contracts are 7 years. Initial officer contracts are 7 years. And then the United States Army has a thing called the needs of the Army. So the needs of the Army, if by your professional grade and rank, by your professional nomenclature, so what you actually do, is in short supply to what the Army needs. Your contract be damned. You're not going anywhere. You're serving until you get released. And that's how I left in the end, because I had a release date, a window opening. I turned down major's rank. I was captain promotable. That's an actual it's all captain's rank, but it's actually written captain, comma, promotable, because you're about ready to go to the next rank.
Mm-hmm.
Left in 2004. What really did it for me, honestly speaking, was going to Dragon Brigade, 18th Airborne Corps. That was headquarters brigade for the 18th Airborne Corps, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And at corps level, I was a staff officer. I was in G3, which is operations. So we help plan exercises, scenarios, and so on. And the thing that you notice, except for when we're planning for Baghdad, so the Second Iraq War, the enemy gamed against, constantly planned against, was Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Always Russia. Used Russian generals, used their profiles as commander of opposition forces. And these profiles, I stumbled across a file of these profiles one night. I was sitting, we were doing a big exercise. It's called an exercise without troops, so it's staff exercise. So it's computer-based, you pass orders on, staffs do their paperwork and their order shuffling and making their plans. You just don't activate all the troops. Some specialty units get activated to do so, but not the majority of the troops, just the staffs. So I'm sitting there one night on duty. All the colonels, most of the colonels and the generals are asleep. So it's pretty boring. I started screwing around on the intranet, and I pop up into a file that has all the profiles of all the active duty Russian generals. This is in 2000. And these were exquisitely detailed profiles. So obviously, A, this was CIA work. B, this was CIA work done with internal leaks. Because I mean, this wasn't just their, what you'd consider a Wikipedia page. These were very detailed analysis of their personality, if they had mistresses, if they liked drinking, who they were friends with in Ministry of Defense, who were their professional enemies in the Ministry of Defense, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, very detailed profiles. And we use these as part of our models, decision models for the opposition force. But everything, like I said, everything was always against Russia. So this is why Clinton and 99 says Clinton and Yeltsin and Clinton and Putin are making kissy sounds, and the Western leaderships. This is before they figured out that Putin wasn't a younger version of Yeltsin, a younger, sober version of Yeltsin. They were making all these noises about how Russia is our best friend, but really, as we planned war with Russia, we were continuing playing war with Russia. So this is, I'd run into various racism in the U.S. Army based on my nationality. So I'd ran into that several times.
People just being biased because you're Russian?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. The first time I ran into it, I wanted to enlist right out of high school. And then the recruiter on at our high school, South Mecklenburg High School, he told me flat out, "You're Russian. They will never let you near a tank." I mean, as an enlisted soldier. Oh, I became a tank. I became an armor officer. So he was quite a bit wrong on that. But when I was in advanced camp, so this is 93.
Right.
I've been living in the U.S. since 79. This was 93, 2 years after the Cold War ended. And this colonel came into our talk with our class, who was the branch officer for military intelligence. And what it means is he was in charge of the HR part of military of that branch. So when you apply to join military intelligence, it was his department that handled the paperwork, his department that said yay or nay, and so on. And his people managed. There was a personal manager for every officer to manage their career. It's not that hands-on as it sounds, but that's how it works. So I went by, I talked to him, hey, sir, I'm interested in military intelligence, blah, 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 blah. I don't have a Russian accent. As a fact, when I want to switch off the Southern accent, from the East, just go flat Midwestern English. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's great, that's great." Now, well, sir, I don't know if this is going to be a problem or not. I'm Russian, and I was born in the Soviet Union, and there's no point in hiding it because your nationality, your place of birth, your religion, everything is
Yeah.
written down in your profile. Everything's written
Okay.
down. And he looked me up and down like a pile of shite and told me to go
Mhm.
fuck myself, basically. And don't even try, turned around, walked away. That was the first really big hit in the face. And then I was in Bosnia. I was uh, executive officer for a mechanized infantry company, and we had a Russian airborne platoon attached to us.
Mhm.
First one of those rare moments in history. And then I was commanding a mixed Russian American inspection team. We're going in to inspect a Bosniak base. So I'm
Mhm.
standing there and we're waiting for the U.S. military intelligence to arrive, um, which is an oxymoron in itself, military intelligence. But so I'm standing there with two Russian lieutenants, one of
Okay.
which I stayed friends with for decades after. And we're talking in Russian, and we're waiting for this team to arrive. And they arrive,
Mhm.
and their lieutenant jumps out of his Humvee, walks up, swarthy looking guy, and he starts speaking Russian to us. We're like, okay, you're not an American. Where the hell are you from? It's like, Armenian. Okay,
Mhm.
so what year did you come to the US? 91.
Right.
Okay, this was 96. 90,
Mhm.
90, 91, somewhere around there. 96. So he just got his citizenship a couple of years before that. Like,
Mhm.
so did you have problems getting into military intelligence? No, no problem whatsoever. Just
Mhm.
to confirm that it was about the fact I was born in the Soviet Union, it was the fact that I was born in the Soviet Union and Russia. And I ran into other people the same. They were Jewish, Ukrainian, and so on that were born in the Soviet Union, had no problems. And then I tried to get into special forces. Yeah, they didn't tell me to go fuck myself because I was a captain at this point. But they did tell me ever so nicely, thanks, but no thanks. We don't know if we can get you a top secret clearance because you're Russian, and we're not going to bother trying. Bye bye. So moments like that. No, and then there's the as they say in Russia, the бытовой racism, the common racism where every time you meet somebody like, and they all think they're so ingenious. I was ready to strangle the next person that would say this. Oh, you're Russian. Are you a communist? Actually, I'm a monarchist, but okay. Other than that, or are you a spy? And so on. And they start with that. Okay, don't backhand them. I'll get arrested. Don't strangle them. I'll get arrested.
The propaganda is so deep in the West and it's so deep in America. It's so deeply entrenched that people don't even know they're being racist. They don't even know they're being offensive when they accuse someone of being a spy. But it's a very serious accusation and it's very negative and it's very, well, it had like, I immediately, when I was accused of being a spy publicly, I was immediately got death threats. I had somebody try to come to my house and said he was going to kill me. I mean, that's how serious it is. So, I don't think that people realize like to make an accusation like that, what dire effects that can have in the United States.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
can't even imagine like if I went back now because I'm here in Moscow, because I've been called like online, I get called all kinds of names, as you know. I was in spaces and someone did. But what was interesting was the government bots that were there, because there was someone there representing the US government who has opposite views that I do. Actually said, we know of you, Tara Reade, but at least you have principles. And I was like, okay, that's weird. They're my enemy, but they know I'm principled. But like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a spy. Like I'm not a spy, and neither are you. And our beliefs are our beliefs. And yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do with American English. The Irish always get it right, right? Like I have Irish background and we always get it right. I'm sorry, but we do. And Ireland is getting it right now. They're always on the right side of history. But
Well,
always, but like, but a
with
lot of,
Ukraine, they're not.
yeah,
With
but
Ukraine, they're not.
the British are terrible, and so
Oh yeah.
is the US. And France is just like whatever, they just go with whatever the US and UK are doing. But I'm glad that you pushed back on the spy narrative and were able to, get, through that.
I won't say it was so much a narrative, but it was just this common like, hey, you're black, you eat chicken.
Uh,
That kind of typical, or in my case also, you drink vodka. Well, actually, I do drink vodka, but no, I'm not an alcoholic, and most Russians aren't either. The vast majority. But
always, yeah. Although I have decided that I will face the Armageddon and my exile, probably not as sober as I used to be. But moving on.
It's okay.
Okay.
I'll tell you. I was on Время помнит и Время покажет on first channel 1 today. These two talk shows, political talk shows, and they had an interview there with Kau. She's the former minister of diplomatic minister of Austria, who's been run out of Austria, literally, because she had pro-Russian views. And so she's eventually moved to Russia because her life was just destroyed. And she was talking about she's lost everybody she was friends with. She had 2 friends that are still talking to her. And no, she'd never been a Russian spy. She just didn't buy the American Anglo narrative with Ukraine. And that was enough, not just destroy her career, but quite literally try to destroy her life.
Yes, they took her house. I met her.
That too. And closed her credit cards and her bank accounts. And, she literally came to Russia 60 years old with nothing.
Yeah, Putin danced with her at her wedding, and the film went viral.
Oh, yeah. So, and I understand her. I didn't quite lose as many people as she did. I lost quite a few people just when we moved. And that was just because, Americans are very, everybody thinks Americans move around a lot. The vast majority of Americans never move anywhere. They stay pretty much where they're born or where they finish university.
I'm scared. I mean, let's face it. I have people, when I came to Russia, that said, please don't call me again while you're in Moscow. I've had friends that I've known since I was in high school or a kid, and they're not speaking to me. I have family that's not speaking to me because I'm here in Moscow, Russia, and they will never speak to me again. And it's like, okay, that's okay. But it's fear. It's fear.
We moved in 2010, so it wasn't quite this insanity. But when the war in Ukraine started, and again, my home city has been shelled by the Ukrainian Nazis for 9 friggin' years. Oh, but nobody talks about that. That doesn't. Russian lives don't matter. Need to set up a new organization. Russian Lives Matter in the U.S. Because while the Ukrainians were fed, the Ukrainian Nazis were installed, fed, and created by the U.S. government and its vassals, murdering Russians in ethnic Russian regions, nobody cared because it's not like real people. That kind of attitude, or it's all too complicated. And then when the war started with Ukraine, over the fact that this was continuing and accelerating, now everybody cares for the defenders of democracy, the dictatorship in Kiev, literally a Nazi dictatorship. Absolutely, literally a Nazi dictatorship with all the symbolism of the Nazis and everything else. It's just amazing. But all that aside, so when it all started, I lost the people I kept contact with, the people I served. I lost 2/3 of them. Won't talk to me because I am a Putin genocide in whatever, Putin vibe genocider of humanity and
it's terrible. But you know what? I love the commentary because we met on Maria Butin's show, Masha's show. Channel 1, and I loved your political commentary when I was able to see the translation because you speak Russian. You have one on me. I start my lessons, by the way, next week.
Excellent about me too.
Yeah, so I will, and I probably need more help, and I'll torture you with my bad Russian, of course.
So we go full immersion. We go full immersion.
But I'm sorry.
No English, all Russian.
Oh, I lost the last part.
No English, all Russian.
Oh yes. Well, we're gonna. It's gonna be a while before we get there. It'll be a while, but when we get there, we get there. But I wanted to say that your work now has been very valuable. I've seen you on different media things, and it's wonderful for you to be on my show. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And I wanted to ask you about, because you talked a little bit about why you left, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about an update on Ukraine, because right now the world's eyes are on Gaza, of course, as it should be, because humanitarian, because there's a genocide happening. But there's also, as you mentioned, in the Donbass, there are people who have been ethnically cleansed in a similar way for years. So could you talk about what's happening? Because it looks like Zelensky's getting kicked to the curb. Is that the right impression? Because while we say that, 14.2 billion went to Israel today from the US Congress, that was voted on today, but there's still $100 billion they want to send to Ukraine. Now, I won't get there, but what's your thoughts, and where are we with the proxy war that US and NATO is fighting against Russia via Ukraine?
Let me begin with saying that Russians and Ukrainians aren't a brother nation. They're the same nation. They're same people, same ethnicity, same history. It's an artificially created nation that never existed in history until 1917. Created first by the Austrians and the Germans, and then upheld and created and widened by the communists, because the way the Bolsheviks controlled the Russians, who were the vast majority of the population of the Soviet Union, was divide and conquer. So they made the Belarusians as a separate ethnicity, which it isn't either. The Russians, I guess they might have gone even further. And they took a very large chunk of Russia, which is called Nova Russia, and added to Mala Russia, small Russia, new Russia, small Russia, and made this Ukrainian thingamajig. And then they added Polish land. Well, they're not really Polish land. They're just lands Poland grabbed at different points in history and re-grabbed in the 20s. And ethnically cleansed the Russians out of it in its own. Poland is not a white little dove that everybody makes it out to be. It is an incredibly aggressive, incredibly racist nation that has committed genocide historically numerous times. In 1939, Poland exterminated its Jews. The Germans didn't do it, the Poles did. And the few Jews that returned in 1945, 46 were killed or had to run again. And then in 1945 to 1948, Poland exterminated the Germans that were on its new territories. So, but, and by the way, the Poles were also one of the major sponsors of the Nazis in Ukraine. But in their case, they're playing the long game because they're planning on annexing Western Ukraine. And they've already got incredible rights that no other nation would ever have on another nation's territory, that Zelensky signed off to that. We can go into that later if you're interested. So the counteroffensive, which is not a counteroffensive, is just an offensive. A counteroffensive is when somebody attacks, you stop that attack, and you turn around and counterattack. That's a counteroffensive. This is just a friggin' summer offensive that was supposed to start somewhere in spring. Okay, so even the Western media, at least the frontline media, has admitted it's over. The second tier is still trying to make sounds like, oh, they're winning, they're almost there. Miley left, so I guess it's hard to Charles Brown isn't going to keep pushing they're making advances. Yeah, they were making advances. The average advance they were making was less than 100 meters a day on a front. First of all, to understand the front and the frontage in this war, the frontage is over 1,000 kilometers. That's over 700 miles from end to end of the conflict. They were making advances or trying to make advances in about 6-7 locations on a frontage of about from 5 to 20 kilometers in width. So these are relatively small areas. So in this entire 5 months of genociding their own population, the Ukrainian Nazis were able to grab 120 square kilometers of territory. Just so you understand, they lost 300 plus kilometers in the north during the same time. And now they're starting to lose what they grabbed because they couldn't hold it. And no, 4 months of preparation in some NATO camp isn't enough to make an army. No matter how much cheerleading is done by Milley or is done by Wallace or whomever else. So no, for all that they lost killed over 80,000 men just during this offensive, summer offensive, and that's I mean, that's a huge number. Ukraine has lost 550,000 plus dead, and that's not really even counting the guys that are dying in the hospitals from crap care or crap logistics. Most of these guys are being left on the field to die. They're being abandoned. They're being left. The tactic that Ukraine, once the heavy equipment was getting blown up because they weren't adequately prepared and they weren't masked to do a true breaching operation in any sense of the word. And I can do a separate show on what a breaching operation really is supposed to look like and what they had in Ukraine. We'll just say it wasn't anything close to what a real breaching operation should have looked like on scale. So it just shows the minimalism of NATO's planning and minimalism of the preparation. So these guys are basically being thrown to die. If this was U.S. troops or British troops or French troops, there would be U.S. or British or French or German generals standing court-martial and going away to jail for the rest of their lives for total military incompetence. But since these are Russians, these are Ukrainianized Russians, they're Slavs, nobody gives a damn. They're not real people. They can play with them, throw them with their lives away, it doesn't matter. And consider quite a few of these people were recruited off the street quite literally with press gangs. You know, we're going right back into press gangs. This is like 1700s England. Quite literally, people come up, they give you a piece of paper, you've now been summoned. If you resist, they hit you on the head, or they beat the crap out of you, and they throw you in the van, and they drive you off. And within a month, the guy's on the front line with an AK getting ready to die. So once the equipment was used up and they wanted to spare whatever equipment they had left, they started meat storms. So what is a meat storm? They take a couple of vehicles, for example, pickups. They pile in a bunch of these guys. So an attack of 30, 40, 50 guys. They drive them up to the edge, drop them off, and get the hell out of there because they don't want to die. And then these guys are supposed to attack forward. If they go back, they'll be shot by the various Nazi battalions that Ukraine set up as blocking forces. So if they go forward, first thing that happens is they get artillery. And then the next thing that happens is they get chopped up into pieces by Russian entrenched Russian infantry. If they're really lucky, they bury their heads into the ground and then give up. And in just the month of September, there were 10,000 that gave up. There's a radio station called Volga on which they can either by phone, there's even a phone app for it now. They can contact localized Russian forces, central operator that'll then farm it out to localized Russian forces, and they can arrange their surrender.
And 10,000.
If they get caught by the blocking forces, they'll get shot in the back, or they get artillery by their own side for surrendering.
Yeah.
Well, in truth, you know, the few countries wouldn't shoot their own guys if they're trying to surrender, unless there's a general order to surrender. I mean, that's the truth of war.
It is, but it's still brutal. It's so brutal. I mean, these are young men
War
or
is
old
brutal.
because they're recruiting old guys too, right? Like,
well,
in
press
50s.
ganging. Recruiting is a very loose word in this case. Press ganging. Up to guys in their mid-60s and kids 15, 16 years old. And now they're trying to recruit women, including pregnant women up to 7 months pregnant.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. There's tons of commercials. There was an interesting commercial that came out, the role of a Ukrainian woman. So it starts off with a woman and a guy, and she's taking off her dress. So to translate it, a slut in bed, a mother in the kitchen, and a defender of Ukraine. And the last image, she's got a rifle and she's in a battle rattle, going off to be a chunk of meat on the battlefield.
They want women to multitask, don't they? Jeez.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, one guy, 100 women, there's a chance for that nation. No women, there's no chance for that nation because, you know, one guy can get 100 women pregnant. No women, there's no further generations. That's it. It's over. It's game over totally. And when they're grabbing 15, 16-year-olds, and I'm sure, and they're planning on lowering the age of recruitment down to 16 from 18. So that'll mean they'll start grabbing the 13, 14, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, the Hitler youth, the Zelensky youth. Oh, the U.S. is fine with it. The U.S. is encouraging it, absolutely encouraging it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so brutal right now. We're in such a brutal timeline. Like it literally, it's breathtaking how awful it is. And you know, the Biden regime is just is one of the worst regimes, and of course they're supporting the Zelensky, regime, the Kiev regime, and it's just a money corruption, money laundering. I wanted to ask you a little bit, because you know a lot about this, about the fact that Zelensky's outlawed the Orthodox Christian Church, just the attack on Christians, the attack on religion. But the U.S. is just fine with it, apparently, because I think it's sort of like a Western disease right now, attacking that. But like, can you talk a little bit about what's going on with what Zelensky did and arresting actual Orthodox priests and monks and nuns, right?
So to begin with, central and eastern Ukraine is Eastern Orthodox under the Moscow Patriarchy. Patriarchy boundaries don't change. It doesn't matter which political entities happen to be in their boundaries. Right. So, for example, when the Abkhazians broke from the Georgians and the Abkhazian church asked to leave the Georgian Patriarchy and join the Moscow Patriarchy, Alexei II, God rest his soul, said, no, it doesn't. Go make peace with your patriarch, because we're not accepting you, because we never accept you, because you are the property of a different patriarchy. Doesn't matter what political entities are on your property. You as priests, that's your high priest in that patriarchy. Go make peace with him. Find your peace with him, and that's how it's supposed to be. So so having said that, Western Ukraine is predominantly Catholic, or what's called Greek Catholic, which is basically Orthodox.
85% are Orthodox. Is that correct?
Right. Greek Catholics are basically Orthodox parishes that switched over to the Catholic Church, but left everything else in place. And then there's Baptists in the South, because when the Baptists were driven out of Europe, they split into two directions. Part ran into the Russian Empire and were given lands in the South, Southwest, and parts ran to America. So having said that, to make this even more confusing, there are three Orthodox churches, or there were three Orthodox churches in Ukraine. There's the canonical church, the actual real Orthodox church, that's the Moscow Patriarchy. Then there was the Church of Ukraine, which is a heretical pseudo-Orthodox entity. And then there was the Patriarchy of Kiev. I want to understand what the Patriarch of Kiev is. Philaret, he was one of the archpriests of the Russian Orthodox Church. Thought he was going to become the Patriarch. He was a very corrupt person. He is a very corrupt person. He's still alive. He's got to be around 90, in his mid-80s. He was an extremely corrupt person. He thought he bought his way to become the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, but the Synod chose Alexei II. And to understand, this is not a racial issue. Alexei II was an ethnic German. So the Orthodox Church doesn't give a damn about your nationality. It gives a damn about your soul. The Japanese Orthodox Church is under the Moscow Patriarchy. And just to understand what the Americans were trying, it's a racist. No, it's not. One Japanese Orthodox Christian is worth more to the Russian Patriarchy than 100 ethnic Russian pagans. I mean, that's just how it is. It's all about your soul. It has nothing to do with your ethnicity. Because before God doesn't look at your ethnicity. He looks at your soul. So you had these three entities. And then under Poroshenko, who was the guy before Zelensky, he roped in the Patriarch of Constantinople to recognize this heretical organization, which patriarchs are not allowed to intervene into the territories of other patriarchs. And if a patriarch excommunicates someone, only that patriarch or the next patriarchs of that patriarchy can bring them back into the fold of the church, if they, of course, ask for forgiveness and recant and so on. These guys didn't do any of that. So the Patriarchy of Constantinople, which is a dying patriarchy, they accepted them as Orthodox, which is against, there's about a canonic law, which the Catholics also accept, because there was one church that accepted. The canonic law was one Orthodox Catholic church at that point. He's broken so many of the canonical laws on doing this. But they created this Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which is not much about God, but a lot about but a lot about Ukrainian nationalism, where God tells them to go kill all the Russians, women, children, and so on. That's actual pamphlets that they put out, and they've got the full backing of the CIA. This is like a wet dream of the CIA, and so on. So you got this, but the vast majority of the Orthodox didn't budge. They know their church. War, no war. They know how to. And the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, which is part of the Moscow Patriarchy, is autonomous. Much more autonomous than the Patriarchy of Ukraine, which is under the Constantinople Patriarchy, which is really not autonomous at all. So, if I haven't confused everybody yet, that was the situation. Well, the problem is for Zelensky, who's a dictator. Most Americans are clueless because, he's just the white lamb of democracy. Or as Lindsey Graham, was it Lindsey Graham who said it? Or was it George Bush? I think it was George Bush. He's the Churchill of our times. We'll leave out the fact Churchill murdered 6 million Indians, but we'll ignore that part. He's the Churchill of our times fighting for democracy. Yeah, the guy outlawed, just as a little rundown, Zelensky's achievements. He outlawed 11 opposition parties. And what I mean outlawed as in jailed or murdered.
He won't hold elections. Yeah. Wow. Right.
He will hold elections now. He said he's willing to hold elections if the U.S. gives him $5 billion for those elections.
Wow.
Elections are expensive in Ukraine. The point is, the U.S. needs those elections because whether Zelensky stays or not, they need to put a stamp of legitimacy on an illegitimate government, one way or the other. So after that, he's murdered off, jailed, or driven off his political opponents. He's confiscated all media and made it into one media channel giant under his control. He's now banned the Orthodox Church because they just wouldn't bend the knee to him and kiss his rear end. He's press gang. Oh, by the way, and all the relics, the remains of saints, they've started popping up. Like for example, the key of Lavra. Lavra is this big cave system where its original church was built in a cave and it grew into a big monastery. And there's remains of saints from 1,000 years ago plus. So they're these very, very holy icons. And all these stuff started popping up in various Western museums. So renting out or selling off antiquity, not just antiquity, but very religious antiquity and roots of the people living in Kiev and other areas.
It's horrible. Yeah, a horrible attack on religion and faith.
That's minor compared to some of the other stuff.
In history, yeah.
Ukraine has over 60,000 missing children. Whole orphanages have been evacuated out to Europe, and that's where the children disappear. The white helmets of Ukraine, which are the white angels, they never go very far from an original template. The white angel.
Can I interject right here? TheTaraReade does a great investigation, the battle against injustice. I featured her on my show. I also read articles. So for a fan that's listening right now, you want to check out, Battle Against Injustice, and you want to check out, just scroll down my Twitter feed, and you'll see some of those. In fact, she does some good investigations. And I think Shea Bose just helped her with one about NATO and their exploitation of children and people in general, and the rapes and tortures and murder, NATO has done. So you want to check out his account as well. He has a lot of good information in his show with Uday. And then I wanted to give out a shout to DD Geopolitics. It's a good account to follow. And there's about 10 people that run that account. I know one of them who's been on my spaces recently, and she's very good. And you get a lot of really good up-to-date information about Ukraine, but also about what's happening in Gaza and geopolitics in general. So check out those accounts, fam. And then before we continue on here, Stas, I wanted to get in some questions from the audience. And then we're going to go talk about a couple of articles, and I want you to stay on and just make some comments as you will. We're shifting to Gaza, but Reef, do you have any questions or comments for Stas at this time from the audience.
Not for Stav, but one for you. I think someone asked if you got Russian citizenship yet, and if there's any updates with that process.
I have political asylum in Russia at this point. I have the blue passport, which I think I've shown. I'll bring it back next week and show it to everyone again. But the outside cover, I don't like show my passport, but just the outside cover because it's kind of pretty. It's blue and gold. And yes, it's I have that, and you know, I'm going through the process that one goes through. So that's the update. Any other questions?
No, that's it.
Or comments? Hey, that's cool. All right, I know we're getting comments. I can't read them right now from where I'm at on my particular platform, but I appreciate all the comments that you make. And if you DM me on Twitter, I will answer you. And feel free to make comments on the YouTube or on the Rumble, or mostly I like to focus on Rumble because YouTube demonetized me, takes down my videos, doesn't like me. So YouTube, you know, whatever. But like, but I really like Rumble, and Twitter is a good thing. X, I guess you call it now. Telegram, haven't figured out how to stream to Telegram yet. It's a little glitchy, but we're on Twitch. We're also on other platforms. How many are we on, Reef, by the way?
Too many between INN and the other stuff, but YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, so Facebook, you know.
Yeah, so. Reef and Indie do INN, which is Indie News Network, and they, out of the goodness of their heart, volunteer and work very hard. And so does Mad Crab, or Greg. You see a Mad Crab on Twitter. He did the artwork and did Stas's beautiful artwork that you see on the cover. And I just want to give a shout out to them because they have their own shows. So follow INN, follow the Twitter account, and let's raise them up because, and they just had an award show. So you can find out what journalists got recognized by INN. And yeah, and I want to do that. So I want to move on, Reef, to our kind of, we had a lot of things to show, but right before we came on air, and I mentioned it at the top of the show, Israel had given a evacuation warning for a hospital that is housing not only people that are injured, but also refugees that are trying to seek shelter from the bombing. So another refugee camp was bombed, but also this hospital, a bomb went off right in front of it, killing, and they had ambulances were evacuating, and then there was an evacuation. If you could show those photos, Reef, on Twitter, I think you have to blur some of them. But there were Geopolitics showed it, as well as Ava Bartlett. If we want to raise up her Twitter, please. Vanessa Beeley has been a good person to follow. Shabos, I mentioned, Fiorella Isabel. Those are good accounts to follow to find out what's going on. But oh, you had to blow, and then Low Key is one I follow with,
here's
but unfortunately,
Israel has bombarded the injured and displaced individuals in front of Al-Shifa Hospital. The Ministry of Health has said that there is a massacre in front of the hospital now. I'll blur and play the video. I mean, it's just chaos, pretty much.
Yeah. So Stas, I want to do your comment on this, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I know, like, personally, I've lost friendships for people that identify with Zionist politics. I have no problem saying out loud, because I have for years, I've had the same position. I really feel for the Palestinians. I don't think Hamas is a terrorist group. They're a resistance organization. Just like I get offended when people say the IRA is a terrorist group. It is a resistance. And that's what my great uncles would call it too. When they dealt with the Troubles, it was a resistance organization against an occupier that was very aggressive, that being the British. Now you have Israeli forces, and you have about 16 resistance groups, but they were trying to bomb one dude and ended up bombing a refugee camp, killing 500 women and children, mostly 75 to 80% was the statistic. The children were playing, and then they weren't. They were evaporated basically and under rubble. So I want to be careful how I approach you, Stas, because I don't know your stance at all, but I'm horrified. And I just kind of wanted you to talk about what your thoughts are as you've seen this dominate the news.
Well, I'll start with I've got relatives in Israel from my father's side. So my father's side is primarily Jewish. My mother's side is Russian.
Well,
They're
there's a
mixed.
yeah, like let's
Huh?
difference between
Yeah,
Jewish.
they're mixed.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, the Jewish synod in Iran has distanced itself from Israel and said, we're Jews, but we're not. I'm Orthodox Christian myself, so primarily for me, the first for any Christian, real Christian, first and foremost that comes before everything else, including nationality, is your Christian brothers and sisters. That's first. God comes before everything else. Then comes nationality and so on. Having said that, I have no problem with Israel's right to exist. Never have. I do view Hamas as a terrorist organization. The true government of the Palestinians is Fatah. It's not Hamas. And Fatah is a mixture. Hamas is an Islamic organization, whether you like it or not. They are a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is, by the way, why Egypt has been so tentative about helping Palestinians. They don't want Hamas on their borders. They're fighting the Muslim Brotherhood within the countries. It is the Muslim Brotherhood, if we remember, came to power for about a year before the military kicked them out with the help of Barack Obama, another great success. He brought a true Islamic.
That was the last time the Palestinians even had a chance to vote, was in 2007. So about 50% of the people that have just been killed never even voted.
Right. Well, you got to remember when Hamas took power in 2006 in Gaza, there were massive massacres. Hamas came in and they just butchered everybody who was in Fatah, and not just the people. They took out their families. I mean, down to the last kids. These aren't nice people. Hamas is a terrorist organization, an Islamic terrorist organization.
Funded by Israel. Hamas.
Well, yes, they were.
Yeah.
They were in their own time funded by Israel as a counterweight to Fatah. And Fatah is a national organization. So you've got Catholics, you've got Orthodox, you've got Muslims, you've got atheists, everybody mixed into Fatah. Because they're just fighting for
Mossad in there, who's running the show intelligence-wise with CIA and MI6 and MI5, right?
Well, having said that, the vast majority of the population in Gaza are not Hamas members. A lot of them are probably going to become Hamas members just to get revenge. Because, if you're watching your family get killed, most men will go grab a rifle and go fight because they've got nothing to live for. It's revenge.
I was saying, Stas, is that Israel uses intelligence, like the satellites, which are US, by the way. When they did some of the bombing, it was US satellites being used to target some of the Palestinian journalists. There were 51 Palestinian journalists, 27, another one got killed today. 27 of the Palestinian journalists are killed, but they weren't just killed, right, in the bombing. They were targeted, their houses and their families were killed by Israeli forces using the satellites by the US.
Now, having said what I said, I mean, when when Hamas went into a lot of these areas, they quite literally massacred whomever they came across. And then they took a bunch of hostages. And it wasn't just Hamas. There was actually like 5 or 6 different organizations under that Hamas umbrella.
So
this
is my question. What do you think when you say Israel has a right to exist? What do you think of them, of the Palestinians' right to exist? Because why isn't anyone saying that in Western media? Why is Western media ignoring that 10,000 Palestinians are dead? 75%, according to UNICEF, were women and children. 75%, unarmed women and children. So what, I guess I don't see how that's Israel defending itself.
I'll get to that in 1 second. Actually, it's much deeper than a lot of people understand how this, the rabbit hole's deep. And that rabbit hole goes into the early 1800s.
They're dead. How
I'll get to now. Having said that, Israel had the sympathy of the world, including the vast majority of Muslim countries, because Hamas is a terrorist organization that committed a huge terrorist act. And believe me, almost any Muslim country, the first victims of any of these Islamic jihadists are Muslims. So they all looked at it and said, "Oh, holy crap." And they're going to have problems with their own groups and their own borders, because this gave a jolt to all these Islamic extremists in the world. Look what we did. Now, having said that, within 2 weeks, they turned world sympathy into world outrage. I don't agree, obviously, with murdering women and children. Let's go back 1 second
our president, because I'm in Russia now, President Putin said, this is, I mean, he even talked about clenched fists, seeing women and children bombed. I mean, it's horrific. There's no both siding it. There's no both siding this. This is a genocide. This is ethnic cleansing. My theory is it's over oil and gas. It's over Western hegemony. Because Israel is an extension. 35% of Israelis are American Jews. 35%.
Well, they're not American Jews. They have U.S. citizenship. A lot of those guys got
came from America and went to Israel and were originally.
I know quite a few that went from Israel to the U.S. They have U.S. citizenship. They have dual citizenship.
Now there's
but right, they weren't born in the U.S. Having said that, I mean, obviously, bombing women and children is a no. Women, there are always going to be in any war. There are going to be collateral casualties, like it or not. There's always going to be some civilians caught in the middle.
I'm sorry, I can't go with the collateral damage bullshit.
Well, no, wait a second. There's a difference. There's a difference.
These are people.
Even in Ukraine, for as much as we fight house to house to get civilians out, there's always going to be some amount of collateral damage. Like it or not, some civilians remain. Having said that, there's a difference between.
Notice President Putin's military operation, they criticize it for being slow, but it's slow because they're only targeting military. They're not taking out civilian populations.
Well, we're not aiming to take out civilian populations. Some civilian population is going to get killed because fighting's taking place in cities. So like it or not, there's still civilians left in these cities. For whatever reason, they didn't leave and they get caught in the middle of this. So like it or not, any war, we've gone away from the 1700s, 1800s where the armies came out in the field, they lined up nice and pretty, and then people came out on a hillside to go watch the battle or something like that, which, by the way, First Manassas was just like that. All the Russian elites came out to watch the battle. Those days are gone. Most battles are fought in cities, and they're fought in cities because it is a good place to defend and it's difficult to take. Civilians, for whatever reason, sometimes civilians are used as human shields. Sometimes civilians refuse to leave. Sometimes civilians can't leave. And the civilians will get caught in direct fighting. But we're not talking direct fighting here.
The human shield argument is used to justify basically murder of civilians. And I mean, now, like you look at the US and you look at John Kirby, right? You look at Jake Sullivan when they trot him out once in a while. But look at what they're saying when they use these same arguments, right? About Gaza, but look how they talk about Russia and Ukraine, and tell me the difference that you see, because when they talk about Russia, Ukraine, they say Russia's doing war crimes, but now they're talking about Israel, they can't say, they just say, we don't have enough information. 500 people got bombed into oblivion and 1,000 are underneath the rubble that can't get out because Israel won't allow big equipment to undo the rubble. So you tell me, Stas.
I'm trying. Let me finish. Now, as I said, there's always going to be some amount of collateral damage, whether you like it or not. Now, there's a difference between fighting, what the Israelis are doing now. Well, let's go back to Munich. In the 1960s, in the Olympic Games, Palestinian terrorists took a bunch of Israeli hostages. The West German special forces screwed up the operation totally, trying to release them, and they all got killed. So he basically had a couple suiciders that took out everybody and themselves. Mossad killed everyone involved in that. Everyone that survived out of the Palestinians that got out, all their backers, all their sponsors, all the planners, all the financial sponsors, everybody died except for one guy who ran to Africa, got a plastic surgery, and hid for the rest of his life. Everyone died. It took several years. They hunted everyone down. There was one case they took a guy out by planting a charge in his telephone. And they called him, old phones with the old big handle. He picked it up and blew his head off. Another guy, they walked into his house, walked past the sleeping kids, duct taped his wife's mouth shut and shot him in the head and walked out. That takes time, but they did it with no collateral damage. It took out every last terrorist. And that's the way, that's a very proper way of doing it. What they're doing now, for whatever reasons, There are different reasons. There's Israeli reasons and there's American reasons. What they're doing now is wiping out the population. Again, yeah, killing one guy, taking out a refugee camp to kill one guy. By the way, Israelis started operating this way, really started operating brutally back around the 90s when they started settling the West Bank. Because that's how you keep an occupation, that's how you occupy the West Bank. Gaza Strip and the West Bank are Palestinian. And that's how it is. That's by UN mandate 1948. There's an Israeli state and there's a Palestinian state. Having said that, the emotion rage in Israel has gone into genocide mode. People are kill them all. You know, we'll kill them all. I don't know, maybe in a year they would stop and go, well, yeah, that was pretty wrong. Maybe they won't. It's hard to say. The relatives I have there, they're all in psychotic rage mode. Like I said, Israel in 2 weeks' time went from having the sympathy of the entire world, including the vast majority of the Muslim countries who were ready to help them against Hamas, to making enemies and losing diplomatic relationships with one country after another, and the list goes literally every day.
Yeah.
From a military standpoint of view, what they're doing is stupid.
Yeah.
Because you're making rubble that's difficult for the tanks to move through. Wiping out the cities, you're making rubble. You're still gonna have to fight through that rubble. It may be even more difficult to fight through that rubble than fighting through more or less intact cities. Tunnels, there are multiple layers of tunnels, quite literally. One of the things that's interesting, Hamas doesn't, as far as I know, I've been told, Hamas doesn't know all the tunnels themselves, the leadership of Hamas, because every local baron digs his own tunnels and would rent them out to Hamas to use. So there's tunnels and tunnels and rooms and so on. It's a labyrinth. The labyrinth's been built for 20 years. There was quite literally and a lot of it's built by criminal organizations, not even jihadist terrorists, but actual just plain old criminal organizations, because they're using that for contraband smuggling. There was a tunnel that the Egyptians found and destroyed that went literally 100 kilometers, 60 miles for the metric system challenged, into the Egyptian territories, across the border, 60 miles, and there were trucks that were running down this tunnel. That's how big the tunnel was. It was some guy on his hands and knees crawling. There were small lorries that were driving up and down this tunnel. So these are giant tunnels. I mean, it's serious work. Some of the blowing up some of these buildings will actually collapse some of the tunnels, but it won't. In the end, the only way to clear the tunnels is to go down it. The proper way of doing this, which would have taken time, which would have also cost Netanyahu his job, and probably at the end of this stage of war, it'll still cost him his job, because, yeah, as long as the war keeps going.
And I say this because there's Western leaders that say he's uncontrollable, and they don't like uncontrollable leaders. So he's done. Get rid of him.
There's one thing. The longer Netanyahu's been in power, the more he's gone into further right-wing extremism as his support base. And his tendencies have gone that direction also.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember anything about Americans after 9/11,
yes,
the vast amount of Americans who have said murder every single Muslim in the world.
Yep.
There was no brain power going there. Everything was shut off.
As America is very pretty much systemically racist, whereas Russia's not.
No, Russia's not.
You have Muslims here that live with Christians, and there's not any kind of friction.
Yeah, and it's been that way for hundreds of years, literally hundreds of years. Now, having said that, first of all, let's remember that in Gaza, about 10 to 15% of the population are Christians. They're Orthodox Christians or Catholic Christians.
Yeah,
Palestinians
they bombed the church. Remember the 1,000-year-old?
Yeah, they bombed an Orthodox church. They bombed a Catholic church. They bombed an Orthodox monastery. Now, just to understand what are Palestinians, because if you listen to like Saudis, they'll tell you they're not Arabs. They're right and they're not right. They speak Arabic. They have Arabic blood, but they're not strictly Arabs. They're a mixture of Arabs, Franks, Germanics, Assyrian. It's a mix of hodgepodge of all these different peoples that over the last 1,500 years fought their way through, grabbed land, in Israel. There are Latins there mixed in from the Roman times, and so on and so on. This is a really hodgepodge population because it just happened to be that part of the world everybody was walking through to get to one direction or another. You want to build an empire in that part of the world, you fought your way through there. So all these different nationalities mix, and it created this Palestinian as a term. Saudi Arabs will tell you flat out, they're no Arabs. We don't recognize them as Arabs. The Saudi street recognizes them Arabs, but really, if it wasn't for what Israel was doing, the vast majority of Saudis wouldn't give a damn what happened to Palestinians because they're not Arabs. So there's the internal issues there. Even Yasser Arafat, just to understand, Yasser Arafat's wife was Christian, his mother was Jewish, who converted to Islam. This is a very mixed region. There's no black and white in this area. So it's a very difficult region to categorize, just because that just happens to be this crossing point on three continents. Mm-hmm. Having said that, again, what the Israelis are doing is counterproductive for them, because Hamas, 30 maybe thousand fighters out of a population of 2.5 million. Well, those number of fighters is growing, just not because people support Hamas or support Islamic ideology, because they want revenge. They've watched their families get killed, and they're just going to go shoot Israelis because.
Yeah, I mean, it was breathtaking. Like, I think 2 days ago, there was a family of 42 extended relatives. They're wiped out from the registry. There's several. In fact, there's I think it's like the numbers are close to 20% of some of the families are literally wiped out. Like, they no longer exist in the world and will no longer exist. And it's that's stunning to me, and it's wrong. And I feel like anyone who is trying to justify it is going to be on the wrong side of history, because we are watching a genocide in real time. And it feels frustrating because you're watching this, and, you know, us being in this space, we're geopolitical commentators. We write, we try to educate, we try to, like you try to do, in a reasonable way. But yet nothing changes. The machine is mowing everyone down.
The problem is Israel is tied at the hip, quite literally, with Christian Zionism. Which, by the way, if you don't know what Christian Zionism is, Christian Zionism existed before Jewish Zionism. Christian Zionism created Jewish Zionism.
Right.
There's this absolutely heretical theology called rapture. It has no foundation in the Bible. It was created by a guy named John Derby back in the 1830s in the UK, and found a lot of fertile ground amongst the evangelicals in the US and Canada and other British territories, or post-British territories. And of course, evangelicals in the UK itself. I don't know how much you know about it being a Catholic. Catholics look at it as a heresy, Orthodox look at it as a heresy. I
mean, Catholic, I'm culturally Catholic, I'm Irish Catholic, but I'm not, I'm not the greatest Catholic. I'm not as practicing with my religion, to be perfectly frank, but I do identify with Catholic. And the evangelical took a big hold in the US, but I think it's a little different than that. Similar, but you're right. They infiltrated, Zionist Christian. I know what you're talking about. I know that sect.
They didn't infiltrate, they created. Christian Zionists are evangelicals. What rapture, and this is how deep the hole goes. There's a religious aspect not from the Israelis, but from the Anglo-West. Rapture believes that Christ is going to come back twice. First, he's going to come back in the heavens and call forth all his saints. And of course, who are the saints? They're the evangelicals. We're going to not die, but just teleport up to heaven. Yeah. And then for 7 years, cats and dogs are going to kill each other, men are going to eat each other, and all chaos happens. And then Christ returns to judge all the sinners, not the evangelicals, all the real sinners, like the Orthodox Catholics, and let them all burn in hell.
Fraternity.
So to create, in the Bible, it's very specifically, Christ is asked, when is the end times? He said, only the Father knows the day, the hour, and the minute. Not even the Son. So in other words, don't guess. Do what you're supposed to do. If it happens in your lifetime, like many thought it was going to happen in their lifetime, biblical time, it happens. But doesn't, it doesn't. be the right Christian as you're supposed to be. Well, these guys are trying to force God's hand. So if you want Armageddon, the Battle of Armageddon, and it doesn't help, by the way, that in the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, the CIA was very active among the evangelicals, teaching them that the Soviet Union was the Antichrist, literally.
Yes.
The Soviet Union was going to be Magog.
Yeah.
So Russians are the Antichrist,
okay.
or the legions of the Antichrist. So all these end-time ministries, they believe in Armageddon, not because, and they support Israel not because they suddenly love Jews. Most of them don't, but because without Jews there is no Israel. Israel has to be ethnically pure in their eyes. So no other ethnicities but Jewish, no other religions, and only then you're going to get the third temple, and only then you're going to get the Armageddon and the end times, and they all get to get zapped up into heaven, and all the rest are going to go burn in hell, and they can sit there and laugh. So if you look at the amount of money and push and support that comes from it, and when I said Christian Zionists, if you look it up, Christian Zionists literally predate Jewish Zionism in England. They helped create Jewish Zionism. Now, Jews have always lived in Israel, always since Moses, since the times of Moses, when they they left Egypt, walked around the desert for 40 years. Moses never saw Israel because he sinned against God, and God said, "You'll never see Israel." Because as a prophet, he couldn't sin, but he did. But when the Jews came into Jericho and into Palestine, well, today it's called Palestine. It wasn't ever called Palestine. The Romans called it Palestine after they disbanded the Jews in Judah. Israel itself there were two kingdoms. There was the Israeli kingdom up north that became pagan, and Nebuchadnezzar destroyed them and dispersed them. Nebuchadnezzar, emperor of the Assyrians. And then there was a state called Judah, which is in today's Israel, which is the southern kingdom that stayed religious to God. And they existed up until the Romans dispersed them. And again, they didn't disperse everybody. They dispersed Jerusalem and a couple other cities like that. After the siege of Jerusalem and the second temple was burned. Historical facts here. So some amount of Jews always exist in Israel. Always were there when the Zionists arrived. Have been, and they lived there, relatively peaceful. You can say for 2,000 years. Back when these territories were of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Roman Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, and so on.
Suffice to say, because we're going over our time, but we started late, so but I know Reef has to go to the next stream here soon. But I wanted to say, basically, and I appreciate the history, that basically right now in this moment, it's a heartbreaking moment. There's no question, and it's a dividing moment for the world, of course, and we'll see what happens from here on in. My theory about some of this is that it's about gas and oil. It's not about religion.
Yes, there's that element.
It's not about racism. It's not about culture. It's not about any of it. It's about access to some of those oil reserves worth more than $1 trillion off the coast of Gaza. It's the Silk Road Initiative that has become very successful. That was going all the way to one of the ports, which is in the middle of if you look of the Gaza Strip, if you look at a map. But before we get into all of that, what my point is that a lot of this is being fueled and funded by the U.S. military machine. And I think that President Putin made some really apt remarks when he said they're using religion to divide. But in actuality, this is about, they see the East rising economically, and they're trying to put a stop to it because the Middle East is aligning more with the East, right? Some of the Arab countries, the dollar's getting dumped. The Saudis dumped the dollar. There's a lot. So a lot of this has to do with Western hegemony, and Israel and US are the same. Mossad and CIA work together. Mossad is Israeli intelligence with MI6. I think there was a good, and I'm trying to remember who did it, but there was a good kind of breakdown about UK's role in this and how a lot of people think it's all England's fault anyway. But my point is that we're at this heartbreaking moment. And I just know that everyone wants civilians, Israeli, Palestinian, but civilians in general, women and children to be safe and to not have this happen.
Now, if I can, two words, and this
Yeah.
again,
And then,
rabbit hole.
give the audience where they can find you and where they can find your channel.
Okay. The rabbit hole's deep in the case that there's been a color revolution against Netanyahu that the Biden administration has been sponsoring. It's been going for the last almost year, slowly, but it's been going. So they're not friends with Netanyahu, but it's come out as efficient at the moment. But there were elements of Mossad that were working with the CIA against their own president or prime minister, the same way that the CIA and the FBI were working against Trump. Even though he's the president, the elected president, they're supposed to be apolitical, working with whomever the people elect. But really, it doesn't work that way. Not in these kinds of organizations. They have their own agenda. They have their own sources of income, very often, on the side. So did they help create this incident? I think absolutely possible that they helped create it. It took possibly Netanyahu by surprise, but Netanyahu is a political survivor, so he'll do whatever it takes to be in power. So if it means then bending the knee to these organizations and doing a genocide, well, okay, I'm in power. So you get a lot of very amoral actors. They're not necessarily all on the same sheet of music, right, but when they need to, they'll all work together because one way or the other, they're all going to survive, whether or not human.
And they want to stop the Silk Road Initiative. They want that to end, and the Biden administration made that very clear. So Bibi was on board with that, and that pipeline that was going and the economic that was going, they wanted to end it existentially and in not just existentially, but completely. They wanted to stop it because the Silk Road Initiative is the future. There is no question that China and Russia and Africa nations and the Arab nations that are uniting, it's prosperous and it's the future.
And take this one step further. 7th of October is when this terrorist attack by Hamas happened. 8th of October, Bibi was supposed to go to Netanyahu was supposed to go to China for the big conference. He was threatening Washington he was going to break relations and move to the Chinese camp, which Washington sure as hell isn't going to tolerate. It's lost too many people like the Saudis as it is. It sure as hell isn't going to tolerate from the Israelis who are fully in their pocket. Well, in a joint pocket. And then you need to consider there is that religious aspect too from the evangelicals. Why they have blind support.
And you have the movement of U.S. troops who are now in the Mediterranean with fighter jets. You have the USS. But all of this is happening. In fact, they just sent some more ships actually to the Mediterranean. The U.S. did.
4 aircraft carriers.
My theory is that the U.S. wants a hot war with Iran, and I'm going off this, but some of the politics that I've seen, discussions that I've seen just on statecraft, some of the others that I follow, and as well as just like Lindsey Graham saying the quiet loud up, although he wants to bomb everybody, but
that little fairy hasn't seen a war he doesn't like.
No, I know.
He never fought in any war, but
basically did say they wanted war with Iran, and here we go. So now
what I love the most is they had a couple months ago they had a Gallup poll that showed that between 18 and 26-year-olds, 61% of the population in the U.S. supporting Ukraine against Russia, but demanded U.S. troops on the ground fighting Russia. 18 to 26-year-olds. The same ones making TikTok videos now screaming, "Hey, I can't be drafted. I'm not capable of this or that." The same moronic idiots playing their Baldur's Gate 3, not thinking, going, "Oh yeah, let's go bomb the Russians." Yeah, well, who do you think is going to be doing the bombing and the dying? It's you morons. It's you 18-year-old idiots who are going to get pulled off your couch, and the feminists are going to go right over there too in the front lines. Because guess what, sweetheart? You wanted equal rights to that level, you got it. So now and there's a bunch of TikToks from these feminists. Oh, I'm not gonna cook. I'm gonna be a wife. I can't fight. I'm a woman. No, you wanted it. Oh, you wanted other women to fight, not you. You want a value. You wanted a value signal. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's your uniform. There's the meat locker that you're gonna be going in afterwards. Go forward. Go do great things and die for your country. Or for certain men in your country.
And you're right. The wars are fought by they use them you young. Although Ukraine now, like what you kind of revealed was they're now going after the old and the young, the
The
very
old, the
young.
young, yeah,
That's all that's left.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
where to find you? And I appreciate you having a lively debate with me. We can agree to disagree on some things. And I love your historical context, because historical perspective also gives a deeper understanding. And that's really valuable. So thank you for your patience with me, because I can be feisty. I get my ire up, get it. But thank you, because you're fun to talk with, and I enjoy the debate, and I know our audience did too. But would you tell people where they can find your work and how they can contact you for more info?
Well, most of my work is in Russian these days.
You can translate. People translate.
And I write for a couple of Russian newspapers too, and I'm mostly on Russian shows. Though I do come out on a couple American. I've been on RT English
No? Yeah.
about 4 or 5 times in the last month, which is new because I've been on RT before, but it was always the Russian side of RT. On the Russian side, my Telegram channel is Stas Tudaya Obratno, Stas there and back. Yeah, I pulled it off of The Hobbit. But
Yeah.
I swiped the title of The Hobbit. Yeah, I know. Not overly original. There's a smaller Telegram channel. Stas was there. So that's in English. I've been guilty. I haven't done much with it as much as I should have. And I also do YouTube videos. I need to put one together, as a matter of fact. Kind of a man walking his dog, sheep, talking about the politics in English. YouTube hasn't canceled me because I guess I'm still too small. I'm still flying under their radar. But I'm sure if it gets big, I'll get the axe and I'll have to go over to somebody else. They're pretty good at that, axing people.
Appreciate you giving all your time and energy, and you really the update on Ukraine, because that kind of like went out the door. I know Zelensky there. I think his days are numbered. Obviously,
Oh,
yeah, his days are numbered. It'll be interesting to see if they, if he escapes, because I kind of think he's in a position where the U.S. isn't going to let him just go to Florida to his mansion. So.
They might let him go to Florida, but if he goes to Florida, let's not forget Marcus. He came from the Philippines. He went to the U.S. with his millions, and where did he end up?
Amalda, yeah, all the shoes.
Yeah. And he wound up in jail, and all his millions got confiscated. This was what amazes me. All these guys that want to be U.S. proxies, none of them end well.
No.
They don't get to have a long, enjoyable, rich life. They all either get killed, or the U.S. will screw them itself and put them in jail, or have them killed.
Or there'll be an accident.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it is not a healthy thing to be a U.S.
No, it's not.
Not a healthy
there
thing.
There are bastards, and we'll kill them when we feel like
it. Well, I look forward to you having a show, and I look forward to having you on again. And we'll talk more about everything that's going on, and we'll definitely talk about it over a pint or two as well. So
pint or two is good. My birthday is not that far off. We can have a little more than a pint or two. I'm planning on it.
There you have it. Happy birthday.
So,
right.
Thanks.
Reef, do you have any closing? I know, Reef, you have to go pretty soon. Do you have any closing remarks for Stas, or questions or anything?
No, not really. I think people hashed it out.
So lots of comments in the sections, people, and I will get to you. I will answer you. Please feel free to DM me. I love those DMs you give me on Twitter. Find me at Reade Alexandra. Follow INN as well. Follow mine. Follow Stas. You can find him on Telegram as well. Say it again one more time, Stas.
The Russian language one is Stas Tudaya Obratno in Latin letters. And the English one is Stas was there.
Okay, and I wanted to give just a moment as we close here. I wanted to tell everyone, I know watching this timeline has been difficult for many people. We're seeing a lot of horrible images. We're seeing a lot of the worst of human behavior, but there's also people trying to do good, and people trying to find peace and balance, and love one another as well, and help, with struggles like with the Palestinian struggle, and raise their voices. Follow the Palestinian journalists that are left. There's 20 some left that are still alive. They're on my you can follow my Twitter and see them. and give them support and a shout out because they need it right now. And a lot of them are suffering and they're working in very dangerous conditions, trying to bring truth. So take
And
care.
just for the Jews that are out there, Israel is not all Jews. And quite a few Jews are actually supporting the Palestinians, and there have been images and videos.
And to leave that on that note, yes, like if you follow Katie, if you follow Gabor Mate, who was on Aaron Mate's show, this was father, who's a trauma expert. He was a Holocaust survivor as a baby, and his family was killed in Auschwitz. He talked about his pain around this and seeing the Palestinians killed. There are many Jewish in the Jewish community, and I said this earlier in the show, is separate from Zionists, very separate thought. And then Stas gave the background about the Christian Zionists, but like they're separate. Zionists are separate from Jewish people, and we've been seeing them all over the Capitol. They've been getting arrested. They've been saying "not in our name." That's been their chant. But either way, may there be some peace. The UN, for the first time, I want to make this last announcement, and then we're going to close the show. For the first time, the UN passed a Russian initiative. Dmitry Polyansky announced it, that it was finally passed, and it was against Nazism. So finally, because lately the US has been, and UK has been voting against all the Russian initiatives, but they did put it on the record to vote against Nazism, which will have an effect, I believe, and that's really good. And the UN has, I know people say it's useless, I know it's whatever, but I know that there are diplomats working very hard. In fact, there were 47 UN people that were just killed by the Israel bombing, and staff. And there are diplomats and there are staff and there are people working very hard day and night trying to find a way to get a ceasefire or peace and get people to the table in all these conflicts. So we'll see what happens in the next.
That's very good with the Nazism, because just a little background that Russia has been bringing up that motion for over 30 years, and the U.S. Has been the one first and foremost who vetoes that every single, and it's the motion to condemn Nazism and condemn anybody who's trying to rebirth it.
Yep. So that takes care of the Banderas. That takes care of those Nazi battalions that are the Azov and others. And there's quite a few other ones that are trying to push that Nazi. Sometimes the U.S. people call it neo-Nazi, but it's Nazi. Genes. So that it is significant. It's meaningful, and I think it was a victory. It was maybe it's only on paper, but let's hope that it means something more. So on a positive note, we'll leave that. And then finally, everyone, follow my Twitter page and you can find, something lighthearted too about Russians taking care of those dastardly snow dicks with bulldozers.
Japan, they should be sending out flyers to Japan.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, fam. And Reef, thank you so much for your patience and running the stream. Thank you, Indy. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Stas. Good night, everyone.
Good night.